The big guy's fist came straight at Jason Statham's jaw. Statham caught the wrist mid-flight, twisted it sideways, and dropped the man's elbow onto the edge of the bar so hard you could hear the wood crack. What happened in the next 45 minutes inside that downtown London pub would become the kind of legend bartenders whisper about for decades, a story passed from bouncer to bouncer, doorman to doorman, until nobody could tell where the truth ended and the myth began. But I'm telling you right now, every word of this is real. Let me set this up fast because it moves quick. It was a Thursday night in Shoreditch. Not a weekend crowd, not a rowdy bunch. Just regulars, a few couples, maybe 30 people scattered across a pub called the Iron Bell. Old place. Dark wood, brass taps, the kind of bar where the stools have been sat in so many times the leather's gone smooth and shiny. Statham was in the back corner with two friends. Nobody was bothering him. He had a pint of Guinness, a plate of fish and chips he'd barely touched, and a low-pulled cap that said, "Leave me alone," without saying a word. Now here's the thing about Jason Statham that most people don't understand. The guy isn't acting tough in those movies. He was a competitive diver on the British national team. He trained in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, and Wing Chun for years before Hollywood ever found him. Guy Ritchie didn't cast him because he looked the part. He cast him because Statham could actually do everything the script asked for. No stunt double, no wire work, just a man who'd spent his whole life learning how to move. But on this night, he wasn't moving at all. He was sitting, talking low, sipping his drink, the kind of quiet that only comes from a man who has nothing to prove. And then Marcus Dunn walked in. Believe me, you need to understand Marcus Dunn to understand what happens next. 6'4", 260 pounds, former semi-pro rugby player who blew out his knee, got bitter about it, and spent the next 5 years replacing discipline with drinking and replacing competition with intimidation. He ran a small crew in East London, not organized crime, more like organized bullying. They'd walk into pubs, pick fights, take what they wanted. Marcus had this thing where he believed size was authority. If you were bigger, you were right. If you were smaller, you shut up. Simple math in his head. He came through the door with two guys flanking him. One was a stocky redhead named Terrence, who had fists that looked like canned hams. The other was a tall, thin guy everybody called Needle because, well, nobody really knew why and nobody wanted to ask. The three of them walked to the bar, ordered without saying please, and started scanning the room the way predators scan a field. It took Marcus about 4 minutes to notice Statham. And the second he did, his whole body language changed. Get this. Marcus didn't recognize him as an actor, not at first. He just saw a fit guy in a cap sitting with two mates, not looking up, not acknowledging the energy shift in the room. And for a guy who needed to be acknowledged the way most people need oxygen, that was a problem. Marcus picked up his pint, walked across the pub, and stood directly next to Statham's table. Not across from it, next to it, close enough that his belt buckle was at eye level. He didn't say anything for about 10 seconds, just stood there, breathing, casting a shadow over the table. Statham's two friends both looked up. One of them, a guy named Danny who worked in film production, shifted in his seat and put both hands flat on the table. The other, a stunt coordinator named Rick, set down his glass and leaned back slightly, giving himself room. Statham kept eating a chip. Marcus tapped the table with two thick fingers. Hard. The salt shaker jumped. "You're in my seat," Marcus said. Statham looked up. His eyes moved from Marcus's belt to his chest to his face. He chewed, swallowed, took a sip of his Guinness. "There's no reserved signs in here, mate," Statham said. His voice was calm, not aggressive, not submissive, just flat, factual. Marcus leaned down, put both hands on the table. "I didn't say it was reserved. I said it's mine." Statham set down his glass and squared his shoulders to face Marcus directly. "Then I suggest you find a new favorite spot because I'm not moving." The pub got quiet, not movie quiet where a record scratches, real quiet. The kind where you hear the refrigerator humming behind the bar and someone's phone buzzing in their pocket 3 tables away. Marcus straightened up. He looked back at Terrence and Needle. They were already moving closer. Terrence positioned himself near the door. Needle drifted toward the far end of the bar, cut off points. They'd done this before. This was choreography for them, a routine they'd practiced on smaller men in smaller pubs for years. I swear this happened. What came next is the part that changes everything. Marcus turned back to Statham and knocked the pint of Guinness off the table with the back of his hand. It shattered on the floor. Dark beer spread across the old wood planks. Foam hissed against the chair legs. Danny pushed back from the table. Rick started to stand. Statham put one hand out, palm flat, and both men froze. He didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on Marcus. "You just broke a glass," Statham said. "That's the barman's problem. But if you touch this table again, it becomes my problem, and you don't want my problems." Marcus laughed, loud, the kind of laugh designed to fill a room and make everyone smaller. "Who are you supposed to be, some kind of hard man? You're 5'10", mate. Sit down and stay down." Statham stood up. "Here's what nobody tells you about physical confrontation. The moment before it starts is where everything gets decided. Most people think fights start with a punch. They don't. They start with positioning, foot placement, distance management, who controls the space between the two bodies. And when Jason Statham stood up from that chair, he did something that Marcus Dunn had probably never encountered. He stepped closer. Not back, not to the side, forward, into Marcus's chest. Close enough that Marcus had to adjust his chin upward to maintain eye contact. Close enough that Marcus's size advantage became a problem instead of an asset, because at that range, long arms can't generate power, tall frames can't create leverage, and the only thing that matters is who's faster with their hands. Marcus blinked. His left foot shuffled back half an inch, involuntary. His body understood the danger even if his brain hadn't caught up yet. "I'll ask you one time," Statham said. "Walk away." Marcus's jaw tightened. His right hand balled into a fist at his side. Or what? And that's when it happened. Marcus threw the punch I described at the top of this story. Big right hand, aimed at Statham's jaw, thrown from too close with too much shoulder rotation and not nearly enough speed. Statham caught the wrist, redirected the momentum sideways, and drove Marcus's elbow down onto the edge of the bar table. The wood cracked. Marcus screamed. Not a yell, a scream. High and sharp and full of genuine shock because the pain was immediate and total. His elbow hadn't broken, but the nerve cluster on the inside of the joint had been compressed against solid oak, and his entire right arm went dead from the elbow down. Marcus stumbled backward, grabbing his arm. His face went white. Statham didn't follow him. He stayed exactly where he was, adjusted his cap, looked at Marcus the way you'd look at a puddle you're deciding whether to step over or walk around. Now here's where most stories like this would end. Big guy throws a punch, tough guy counters, everyone cheers. But that's not what happened, not even close. Because Marcus Dunn was not the kind of man who understood a single lesson. Terrence was already moving. The stocky redhead came from the left side, fast for a heavy man, and he wasn't throwing a punch. He was going for a tackle. Low, rugby style, aimed at Statham's midsection. Statham pivoted on his left foot, let Terrence's momentum carry him past, and drove a knee into Terrence's ribs as he went by. The sound was dull and deep. Terrence hit the floor, slid into a chair, and curled up with both arms wrapped around his torso. He stayed down. That was it for Terrence. One move, one knee, done. You gotta understand something. The entire pub is watching this. 30 people. Phones are out. The bartender, a woman named Siobhan who'd been pulling pints at the Iron Bell for 11 years, had her hand on the house phone ready to call police. But she hadn't dialed yet, and later, when someone asked her why, she said something that stuck with everyone who heard it. She said, "Because he was handling it, cleanly. I've seen 100 bar fights. I've never seen anyone handle it." Needle came next. The tall, thin guy pulled something from his jacket, and for one terrible second, everybody in that pub thought it was a knife. It wasn't. It was a collapsible baton. Metal, about 16 inches extended. The kind of thing that can shatter bone if it connects. No lie, this is where it gets serious. Needle flicked the baton open and swung at Statham's head. Fast, vicious, no warning shot. He was going for damage. Statham ducked. The baton whistled over his cap and hit nothing but air. Before Needle could reset, Statham stepped inside the arc, grabbed Needle's weapon hand with both of his own, twisted the wrist until the baton dropped, and then did something that made the entire pub flinch. He swept Needle's legs out from under him and put him flat on his back on the pub floor. Then he knelt on Needle's chest, one knee pinning him down, and held the baton in front of Needle's face. "This is a weapon," Statham said. "Calm, controlled, not breathing hard. You brought a weapon into a pub, that makes this something else entirely. Nod if you understand." Needle nodded. His eyes were wide and wet. Statham tossed the baton behind the bar to Siobhan. She caught it with one hand without blinking. Statham stood up and stepped back. Needle rolled to his side, got to his hands and knees, and crawled toward Terence. The two of them ended up huddled near the wall, beaten and bewildered, and the whole thing had taken less than 90 seconds. But Marcus was still standing. His right arm was hanging useless at his side. His face had gone from white to red. And here's where the story takes the turn that nobody saw coming. Because Marcus Dunn did something that changed everything about this night. He started crying. Not sobbing, not wailing, just tears running down his face, jaw clenched, chest heaving, standing in the middle of a London pub with his dead arm and his defeated friends and 30 strangers staring at him. And he said something that split the room in half. "My brother died 2 weeks ago." The whole pub held its breath. Marcus wiped his face with his good hand. His voice cracked. "He was smaller than you." Quiet, kept to himself. 3 blokes jumped him outside a club in Hackney, beat him into a coma. He died on a Tuesday. A Tuesday. Nobody does anything on a Tuesday, and my brother died on one. Statham's posture changed. Not a lot, but enough. His hands went from combat-ready to loose at his sides. His chin dipped a fraction of an inch. His weight settled from the balls of his feet back to flat, and he did something that stunned everyone more than the fighting. He pulled out a chair and pointed to it. "Sit down," Statham said. Not an order, an offer. Marcus stared at the chair, stared at Statham, stared at his 2 friends on the floor. His mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. "Why?" Marcus whispered. "Because you're about to fall down, and you might as well do it into a chair." Cross my heart that happened. Jason Statham, the hardest-looking man in any room he walks into, just offered a chair to the bloke who tried to knock his head off 30 seconds ago. Marcus sat down, heavily, his whole body deflated. The aggression drained out of him so fast it was almost visible, like watching a tire slowly go flat. He put his good hand over his face and his shoulders shook once, twice, then went still. Statham sat across from him. He flagged Siobhan and held up 2 fingers. She poured 2 whiskeys without being asked twice and brought them over herself, set them on the cracked table and walked away. For about a minute neither man spoke. Marcus drank his whiskey in one pull. Statham sipped his. The pub slowly, gradually, uncertainly started breathing again. People put their phones down. Someone whispered something to a friend. A chair scraped. The sound of the world remembering it was allowed to move. "What was his name?" Statham asked. Marcus looked up. His eyes were red. Colin Dunn. He was 26. "And you've been walking into pubs looking for the fight he never got." It wasn't a question. Marcus heard it, and his jaw tightened. Then it loosened. Then he nodded. "Take my word for it, what I'm about to describe is the part of this story that separates it from every other bar fight video you've ever watched. Because Jason Statham could have left it there. He could have finished his whiskey, dropped money on the bar, and walked out a legend for the fighting alone. But that's not what he did. He leaned forward, elbows on the cracked table, voice low enough that only Marcus could hear. But Danny was close enough to catch pieces, and later, Rick filled in the rest, and between the 2 of them, this is what was said. "I lost someone too," Statham said, "long time ago. A friend from the diving team, got into something stupid, wrong people, wrong night. I spent a year being angry at everyone who looked like they deserved it. You know what I found at the end of that year?" Marcus shook his head. "Nothing, absolutely nothing. Because the anger doesn't build anything. It just eats the floor out from under you until one day you fall through and there's nothing left to land on." Marcus stared at the table. His good hand was trembling. "Those 3 blokes who jumped your brother," Statham said. "Were they caught?" "2 of them. 3rd one ran." "Then you've got 2 in the system and 1 to find. That's a job for lawyers and investigators, not for fists in a pub." Statham pushed the 2nd whiskey toward Marcus. "Drink that, then go home." Marcus picked up the glass, held it for a long moment. Then he drank. Now, this could be the end. In a movie, this is where the credits roll. The hard man shows his heart, The bully finds his grief. Everybody learns a lesson. But this is real life, and real life has a way of throwing one more curveball when you think the game is over. Because someone in the pub had been recording since the first punch, and they'd already uploaded the fighting portion to social media. In the 30 minutes since the altercation started, the clip had been shared over 4,000 times. And one of the people who saw it was a reporter from the Evening Standard, who lived 3 streets away from the Iron Bell. Her name was Priya Sharma, and she walked through the door exactly 22 minutes after the last punch was thrown. She had her press badge, her phone recording, and a look on her face that said she smelled a story the way a bloodhound smells a trail. She went straight to the bar, asked Siobhan what happened. Siobhan gave her the short version. 3 men started trouble, 1 man finished it, and now they were all sitting down having whiskey. Priya looked over at Statham's table. Her eyes went wide. Is that Jason Statham? It is. And he just fought 3 men? He did. And now he's having a drink with the one who started it. She is, Siobhan said, correcting nothing but pointing Priya's attention at the thing that actually mattered. Priya walked over to the table. She was smart about it. Didn't lead with a question. Didn't shove a phone in anyone's face. She stopped a few feet away and waited until Statham looked up. I'm Priya, Evening Standard. I saw the video. Can I ask what happened? Statham looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his empty glass. Then Marcus looked at Priya and said 4 words that tilted the whole night on its axis. I started it, unprovoked. You could have heard a feather land on carpet. Straight up, I did not see that coming when I first heard this story. A man who'd walked into a pub looking for a fight, who'd thrown the first punch, who'd brought 2 armed friends with him, just admitted it, on the record, to a reporter, while sitting across from the man he'd attacked. Priya blinked, turned to Statham. And you're sitting with him? Statham shrugged one shoulder. He's having a rough month. That's it. That was his answer. 5 words. Not a speech, not a lecture, not a carefully worded PR statement crafted by a team of publicists. Just a man explaining an act of basic human decency the way you'd explain why you held a door open for a stranger. Here's the thing that most people miss about this story. The video that went viral, the one with the fight, got 14 million views in 3 days. The combat was clean, efficient, devastating. Classic Statham. People watched it and said, yeah, that's exactly what I expected. A hard man doing hard things. But the follow-up video, the one a pub patron named James Okafor recorded on his phone, showing Statham pulling out the chair, sitting down with Marcus, buying him a drink, talking low and steady to a broken man who just tried to break his jaw, that video got 41 million views. 41 million. Because the world has seen plenty of men win fights. The world is starving for men who win the moment after. Now, I need to tell you what happened to Marcus Dunn. Because that's the twist. That's the part that will genuinely blow your mind. 3 weeks after that night at the Iron Bell, Marcus Dunn walked into a London police station and filed a formal statement about his brother's death. He provided information about the 3rd attacker, the one who'd run, details he'd been holding back because he'd wanted to find the man himself and deliver his own justice. The police used his statement, combined with CCTV footage they'd been unable to contextualize, and arrested a 24-year-old named Darren Gibbs in a flat in Tottenham 6 days later. Marcus didn't take credit, didn't do interviews, didn't post about it. Danny, Statham's friend, found out through a mutual contact in East London and told Rick, who told Statham on the set of a film in Los Angeles 3 months later. And Statham's response, according to Rick, was a single nod and the words, "Good, that's what chairs are for." On my life, that's what he said. But hold on, we're not done. Because the story has one more layer, and this is the one that turns a bar fight into an actual legend. 1 year after the incident, a gym opened in Hackney. Small place, clean, heavy bags, a mat room, a boxing ring in the back. The sign above the door read Dunn Brothers Boxing and Fitness. It was funded partially by a small business grant, partially by a bank loan, and partially by an anonymous donation that Marcus Dunn has never publicly discussed, but which Siobhan, the bartender, confirmed came through a production company associated with a very specific British action star. Marcus Dunn teaches boxing to teenagers in East London. Kids who remind him of Colin, kids who remind him of himself. He tells every new member the same thing on their first day. Strength isn't what you do to someone, it's what you do instead. Terrence works the front desk. Needle, real name Arthur, mops the floors and maintains the equipment. Neither of them has been in trouble since. And here's the part that makes me lose it every single time I tell this story. Above the boxing ring, mounted on the wall in a simple black frame, there's a photograph. It's a still from one of the phone videos taken that night. The moment Statham pulled out the chair, you can see his hand on the back of it, his chin tilted down, Marcus standing there broken and bewildered. Below the photograph, on a small brass plate, are 6 words. Everyone deserves one more round. Nobody knows who had it framed. Marcus says it was there when he arrived on opening day. The building's landlord claims no knowledge. Siobhan says she has her theories but isn't talking. If you've stuck with me through this whole story, if this hit you the way it hit me the first time I heard it, do me a favor and subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell. That's all I'm asking, because stories like this deserve to be found by more people, and the algorithm only moves when you do. Now let me finish this properly. The iron bell is still open. Siobhan still tends bar. The table that Statham cracked with Marcus's elbow has been repaired, but if you look closely, you can see the seam in the wood where the new piece was joined to the old. Regulars call it the Statham scar. Siobhan charges anyone who asks about it an extra £1 on their pint. She says it's a stupidity tax. The video of the fight still circulates. Every few months it resurfaces on a new platform, gets a new wave of views, a new round of comments. People break down the wrist catch in slow motion. They analyze the knee to Terrence's ribs. They debate the baton disarm. All of it valid, all of it impressive, all of it missing the point entirely. Because Jason Statham didn't become a legend in that pub by catching a punch. He became a legend by pulling out a chair. I tracked down Danny for this story. He didn't want to be recorded, but he told me something over the phone that I wrote down word for word. He said, "I've been on film sets with Jason for years. I've watched him jump off buildings, fight 5 guys at once, drive cars through walls. None of that scared me. But when he sat down across from that man and just listened, that's the first time I ever thought, this guy is genuinely dangerous, because he chose not to be. That's the twist. That's the thing nobody expected. Not the fight, not the takedown, not the baton disarm that made every martial arts forum on the internet lose its collective mind. The twist is mercy. The twist is that the hardest man in the room looked at the man who attacked him, saw the grief underneath the violence, and decided that winning the fight wasn't enough. He had to win the person, and he did. Marcus Dunn hasn't thrown a punch in anger since that night. His gym has trained over 200 young people. 3 of them have gone on to compete at amateur national level. One of them, a 17-year-old girl named Aisha, won a regional title last spring and dedicated it to Colin Dunn, a man she never met, because Marcus told her his story on her first day of training. That's what one chair can do. That's what one conversation can do. That's what happens when a man who could destroy you decides to rebuild you instead. Listen to me. I've told a lot of stories on this channel. Stories about fighters, about legends, about moments that define careers and lives. But this one is different. This one doesn't end with a knockout. It doesn't end with a crowd roaring or a referee counting to 10 or a man standing over a defeated opponent with his arms raised. This one ends with a chair pulled out in a London pub. A whiskey poured by a bartender who'd seen everything but had never seen this. A broken man sitting down because he was invited to. And a quiet conversation that changed the trajectory of at least 3 lives, possibly more, possibly many more. Because every kid who walks into that Hackney gym is walking through a door that exists because of what happened that night. Jason Statham never talked about it publicly. No interview, no social media post, no carefully timed press release tied to a film opening. When a reporter finally cornered him at a premiere and asked about the night at the Iron Bell, Statham's answer was 7 words long. A man needed help. I was there. Then he walked the red carpet, did his photos, and went inside. And that was the last time he ever addressed it. You want to know what a legend is? It's not the man who wins every fight. It's the man who knows which fights to finish with his hands, and which fights to finish with a chair, a whiskey, and the simple act of sitting down across from someone who is drowning and saying, "Tell me his name." His name was Colin Dunn, 26 years old. died on a Tuesday. And because a stranger in a pub decided to listen instead of leave, Colin's name is now painted on the wall of a boxing gym in Hackney, spoken by teenagers who carry his story forward every single day. A name that would have been forgotten if one act of violence had been met with nothing but violence in return. That's the legend, and it didn't start with a punch. It started with a chair.